Chapter 17. The Four Champions. Harry sat there, aware that every head in the great hall had turned to look at him. He was stunned, he felt numb, he was surely dreaming. He had not heard correctly. There was no applause. A buzzing, as though of angry bees, was starting to fill the hall. Some students were standing up to get a better look at Harry as he sat frozen in the seat. Up at the top table, Professor McGonagall had got to her feet and swept past Ludo Bigman and Professor Karpov to whisper urgently to Professor Dumbledore, who bent his ear toward her, frowning slightly. Harry turned to Ron and Hermione. Beyond them, he saw the long Gryffindor table, all watching him, open-mouthed. "I didn't put my name in," Harry said blankly. "You know I didn't." Both of them stared just as blankly back. At the top table, Professor Dumbledore had straightened up, nodding to Professor McGonagall. "Harry Potter," he called again. "Harry, up here, if you please." "Go on," Hermione whispered. "Give Harry a slight push." Harry got to his feet, rode on the hem of his robe, and stumbled slightly. He set off up the gap between the Gryffindor and Hufflepuff table. It felt like an immensely long walk. The top table didn't seem to getting any nearer at all, and he could feel hundreds and hundreds of eyes upon him, as though each were a searchlight. The buzzing grew louder and louder. After what seemed like an hour, he was still in front of Dumbledore, feeling the stare of all the teachers upon him. "Well, through the door," Harry said. Dumbledore. He wasn't smiling. Harry moved off along the teacher's table. Hagrid was seated right at the end. He did not wink at Harry or wave or give any of his usual sign of greeting. He looked completely astonished and stared at Harry as he passed like everyone else. Harry went through the door out of the great hall and found himself in a smaller room lined with painting of witches and wizards. A handsome fire was roaring in the fireplace opposite him. The face in the portrait turned to look at him as he entered. He saw a wizard which flit out of the flame of a picture and into the one next to it, which contained a wizard with a walrus mustache. The wizard which started whispering in the ear. Victor Crumb, Cedric Diggory, and Fleur Delacour were grouped around the fire. They looked strangely impressive, silhouetted against the flame. Crumb, hunched up and brooding, was leaning against the mantelpiece, slightly apart from the other two. Cedric was standing with his hand behind his back, staring into the fire. Fleur Delacour, looking around when Harry walked in, drew back, her sheet of long silvery hair. "What is it?" she said. "Does he want us back in hell?" She thought he had come to deliver a message. Harry didn't know how to explain what had just happened. He just stood there looking at the three champions. It struck him how very tall all of them were. There was a sound of scurrying feet behind him, and Ludo Bigman entered the room. He looked at Harry by the arm and led him forward. "Extraordinary," he muttered, squeezing Harry's arm. "Absolutely extraordinary, gentlemen." "Lady," he added, approaching the fireside and addressing the other three, "may I introduce incredible though it may seem the fourth Triwizard champion." Victor Crumb slightly up. His surly face darkened as he surveyed Harry. Cedric looked non-puzzled. He looked from Bagman to Harry and back again, as though sure he must have misheard what Bagman had said. Fleur Delacour, however, tossed her hair, smiling, and said, "Oh, very funny joke, Mr. Bagman." "Joke?" Bagman repeated, bewildered. "No, no, not at all." Harry's name just came out of the goblet of fire. Crumb's thick eyebrows contracted slightly. Cedric was still looking polite, bewildered. Fleur. But evidently there has been a mistake, she said contemptuously to Bagman. I cannot compete. He is too young. Well, it is amazing, said Bagman, rubbing his smooth chin and smiling down at Harry. But as you know, the age restriction was only imposed this year as an extra safety measure. And as his name came out of the goblet, I mean, I don't think there can be any ducking out of this stage. It's down in the rules, you are obliged. Harry will just have to do the best he. The door behind them opened again, and a large group of people came in. Professor Dumbledore, followed closely by Mr. Crouch, Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxim, Professor McGonagall, and Professor Snape. Harry heard the buzzing of the hundred of the students on the other side of the wall. Before Professor McGonagall closed the door, Madame Maxim said Fleur at once, striding over to her headmistress. They are saying that this little boy is compete also. Somewhere under Harry's numb disbelief he felt a ripple of anger. Little boy? Madame Maxim had drawn herself up to her full and considerable height. The top of her handsome head brushed the candle-filled candelier, and her giant black stained bosom swelled. What is this meaning of this? Dumbledore said, she said patiently. I had rather liked to know the myself. Dumbledore, said Professor Karkaroff. He was wearing a still smile, and his blue eyes were like chips of ice. To Hogwarts champion. I don't remember anyone telling me the whole school is allowed two champions, or have I not read the rules carefully enough? He gave a sort of nasty laugh. That's impossible, said Madame Maxim. Those enormous hand with its mini superb opal was resting upon Fleur's shoulder. Hogwarts cannot have two champions. It is most injustice. Yonder were impressed that your age line will keep out younger contestant. Dumbledore, said Karkaroff, his stilly smile still in place, though his eyes were colder than ever. Otherwise, we would of course have brought along a wider section of candidates from our own schools. Once fought but Potter's Karkaroff, said Snape softly. His black eyes were alight with malice. Don't go blaming Dumbledore for Potter's determination to break rules. He had been crossing line ever since he arrived here. Thank you, Severus, said Dumbledore firmly. And Snape went quiet, though his eyes still glaring malevolently through his curtain of greasy black hair. Professor Dumbledore was now looking down at Harry, who looked right back at him, trying to discern the expression of the eyes behind the half-moon spectacles. Did you put your name into the goblet of fire, Harry? He asked calmly. No, said Harry. He was very aware of everybody watching him closely. Snape made a soft noise of impatient disbelief in the shadow. Did you ask any older student to put it into the goblet of fire for you? Said Professor Dumbledore, ignoring Snape. No, said Harry vehemently. Oh, but of course he's lying, cried Madame Maxim. Snape was now shaking his head, his lips curling. He could not have crossed the age line, said Professor McGonagall sharply. I'm sure we will all agree on that. Dumbledore must have made a mistake with this line, said Madame Maxim, struggling. It is possible, of course, said Dumbledore politely. Dumbledore, you know perfectly well you did not make a mistake, said Professor McGonagall angrily. Really, what nonsense! Harry could not have crossed the line himself, and as Professor Dumbledore believed that he did not pursue an older student to do it for him. I'm sure that she would be good enough for everyone else. She shot a very angry look at Professor Snape. Mr. Crouch, Mr. Bagman, and Karkaroff, his voice uncautious once more. You are our objective judge. Surely you will agree that this is most irregular. Bagman wiped his round boyish face with his handkerchief and looked at Mr. Crouch, who was standing outside the circle of the firelight and face half hidden in the shadow. He looked slightly eerie, the half darkness making him look much older, giving him an almost skull like appearance. When he spoke, however, it was in his usual curt voice. We must follow the rules, and the rules state clearly that those people whose name came out of the goblet of fire are bound to compete in the tournament. Well, Barty knows the rules. Look back to front, said Bagman, beaming and turning back to Parcroft and Madame Maxim, as though the matter was now closed. I insist upon revisiting the name of the rest of the students, said Carcroft. He had dropped his unconscious tone and he smiled now. His face wore a very ugly look indeed. You will set up the goblet of fire once more, and we will continue adding names until each student has two champions. It's only fair, Dumbledore, but Carcroft, it doesn't work like that, said Bagman. The goblet of fire just gone out. It won't reignite until the start of next tournament, in which Durmstrang will mostly certain not to be competing, exploded Karkov. After all our meeting and negotiations and compromises, I little expected something of this nature to occur. I have half of mind to leave now. Empty threat, Karkov, growled a voice from near the door. You can't leave your champions now. He has got to compete. They'll all got to compete. Binding magical contract like Dumbledore said convenient. Uh, Moody had just entered the room. He limped toward the fire and with every right step he took, there was a loud clunk. Convenient, said Carcroft. I am afraid I don't understand you, Moody. Harry could tell he was trying to sound disdainful, as though what Moody was saying was barely worth his notice. But his hand gave him away. They had balled themselves into fist. Don't you? Said Moody quietly. It's very simple, Karkaroff. Someone put Potter's name in that goblet knowing he had how to compete it came out. Evidently, someone wished to give Hogwarts two bites at the apple, said Madame Maxim. I quite agree, Madame Maxim, said Carcroft, bowing to her. I shall be logging complaint with the Ministry of Magic and the International Confederation of Wizards. If anyone got reason to complain, it's Potter, glowed Moody. But funny thing, I don't hear him saying a word. Why should I complain? Burst out Fleur Delacour, stamping her foot. He has the chance to compete, hasn't he? We have all been opening to be chosen for weeks and weeks. The honor for our school, 1,000 gallon in the prize money. This is a chance many will die for. Maybe someone's hoping Potter is going to die for it, said Moody with the immersive trace of growth. An extremely tense silence followed these words. Ludo Bagman, who was looking very anxious indeed, bounced nervously up and down on his feet and said, Moody, old man, what a thing to say. We all know Professor Moody considered the morning wasted if he hasn't discovered 6 plots to murder him before lunchtime, said Carcroft loudly. Apparently, he is now teaching his student to fear assassination too, an odd quality in the defense against the dark art teacher. Dumbledore, but no doubt you had your reasons. Imagining things I am, growled Moody, saying things. It was a skilled witch or wizards who put the boy's name in that goblet. What evidence is zero of that? Said Madame Maxim, throwing up her huge hand. Because they hoodwinked a very powerful magical object, said Moody. It would have needed an exceptionally strong confidence charm to blossom the goblet into forgetting that only three schools compete in the tournament. I'm guessing the submit photo's name under a fourth school to make sure he was the only one in his category. You seem to have given his a great deal to thought, Moody said Parkroff coldly, and a very igneous theory it is, though of course I heard you recently got it into your head that one. Your birthday present contained a cunningly disguised basilic egg and smashed it to pieces before realizing it was a carriage clock. So you'll understand if you don't take you entirely seriously. There are those who'll turn innocent occasion to their advantage. Moody resorted in a menacing voice. It's my job to think the way dark wizards do, Harcroft. As you have to remember, Ulster, said Dumbledore warningly. Harry wondered for a moment whom he was speaking to, but he realized Mad-Eye Moody could hardly be Moody's real first name. Moody fell silent, though still serving Harcroft with satisfaction. Harcroft's face was burning. How this situation arose we do not know, said Dumbledore, speaking to every gathered in the room. It seemed to me, however, that we have no choice but to accept it. Both Cedric and Harry have been chosen to compete in the tournament. This therefore they will do. But Dumbledore, my dear Madam Maxim, if you have an alternative, I would be delighted to hear it. Dumbledore waited, but Madame Maxim did not speak. She merely glared. She wasn't the only one either. Snape looked furious. Carcroft, livid. Pegman, however, looked rather excited. Well, shall we crack on then? He said, rubbing his hands together and smiling around the room. Got to give our champion their instruction, haven't we? Barty want to do honor. Mr. Crouch seemed to come out of the deep river. Yes, he said, instruction, yes. The first task, he moved forward into the firelight chosen up. Harry thought he looked ill. There were dark shadows beneath his eyes and a thin, peppery look about the wrinkled skin that had not been there at which World Cup. The first task is designed to test your daring, he told Harry, Cedric, Fleury, and Victor. So we are not going to be telling you what is it. Courage in the face of the unknown is an important quality in a wizard. Very important. The first task will place on November the 24th in front of the other student and the panel of judges. The champions are not permitted to ask for or accept help of any kind from their teachers to complete the task in the tournament. The champion will face the first challenge armed only with their wands. They will receive information about the second task when the first is over. Owing to the demanding and time-consuming nature of the tournament, the champions are exempted from end-of-year tests. Mr. Crouch turned to look at Dumbledore. I think that's all. Is it, Albus? I think so, said Dumbledore, who was looking at Mr. Crouch with mild concern. Are you sure you wouldn't like to stay at Hogwarts tonight, Barty? No, Dumbledore, I must get back into the ministry, said Mr. Crouch. It's a very busy, very difficult time at the moment. I have left young Weatherby in charge, very enthusiastically, a little over-enthusiastic, if truth be told. You'll come and have a drink before you go at last, said Dumbledore. Come on, Barty, I'm staying, said Bagman brightly. It's all happening at Hogwarts now, you know, much more exciting here than at the office. I think not, Ludo, said Crouch with a touch of his old impatience. Professor Calcroft, Madam Maxim, a nightcap, said Dumbledore. But Maxim had already put her arm around Florer's shoulder and was leading her swiftly out of the room. Harry could hear them both talking very fast in French as they went off into the great hall. Calcroft beckoned to Crump and They too excited through in silence. Harry, Cedric, I suggest you go up to the bed, said Dumbledore, smiling at both of them. I'm sure Gryffindor and Hufflepuff are waiting to celebrate with you, and it would be a shame to deprive them on this excellent excuse to make a great deal of mess and noise. Harry glanced at Cedric, who nodded, and they left together. The great hall was deserted now. The candles had burned low, giving the juggled smile of the pumpkin an eerie, flickering quality. So said Cedric, with a slight smile, we are playing right against each other. I suppose, said Harry. He really couldn't think of anything to say. The inside of his head seemed to be in complete disarray, as though his brain had been resynced. So tell me, said Cedric as they reached the entrance hall, which was now lit only by torch in the absence of goblet of fire. How did you get your name in? I didn't, said Harry, staring up at him. I didn't put in. I was telling the truth. Oh, okay, said Cedric. Harry Coulter. Cedric didn't believe him. I'll see you then. Instead of going up the marble staircase, Cedric headed for a door to its right. Harry stood listening to him going down to the stone step behind it. Then slowly he started to climb the marble one. Was anyone expect Ron and Hermione going to believe him, or would they all think he had put himself in for a tournament? Yet how could anyone think that when he was facing competitors who had had 3 years more magical education than he had, when he was now facing tasks that not only sounded very dangerous but which were to be performed in front of hundreds of people? Yes, he had thought about it, he had fantasizing about it, but it had been joked really an idle sort of dream he had never really seriously considered entering. But someone else had considered it, someone else had wanted him to in the tournament and had made sure he was entered. Why to give him a treat? He didn't think so somehow. To see him make a fool of himself, well, they were likely to get their wish, but to get him killed. Was Moody just being his usual paranoid self? Couldn't someone have put Harry's name in the goblet as a trick or practical joke? Did anyone really wanted him dead? Harry was able to answer what that at once. Yes, someone wanted him dead. Someone had wanted him dead ever since he had entered a year. Lord, Lord Voldemort. But how could Voldemort have ensured that Harry's name got into the goblet of fire? Voldemort was supposed to be far away in some distant country in hiding alone, feeble and powerless. Yet in that dream he had had just before he had awoken with the scar hurting, Voldemort had not been alone. He had been talking to Wormtail, plotting Harry's murder. Harry got a shock to find himself facing the fat lady already. He had barely noticed where his feet were carrying him. It was also a surprise to see that she was not alone in her frame. The wizard witch who had flitted into her neighbor's painting when he had joined the champions downstairs was now staring smugly behind the fat lady. She must have dashed through every picture lining 7 staircase to reach here before him. Both she and the fat lady were looking down at him with the mixed interest. Well, said the fat lady violence. Just told me everything who just been close and school champion. Then, Patrish, said Harry dully. It most certainly isn't it, said the pale witch indignantly. No, it's the password, said the fat lady soothingly, and she swung forward on her hinges to let Harry into the common room. The blast of noise that met Harry's ear when the portrait opened almost knocked him backward. Next thing he knew, he was being wrenched inside the common room by about a dozen pairs of hands and was facing the whole of Gryffindor house. all of whom were screaming, applauding, and whistling. You wouldn't have told us you had entered below Fred. He looked half annoyed, half deeply impressed. How did you do it without getting a beard? Brilliant, roared George. I didn't, said Harry. I don't know how, but Angelina had now swooped down upon him. Oh, if it couldn't be me, at least it's a Gryffindor. You will be able to pay back degree for the last Quidditch match. Harry shrinked Catty Bale, another of the Gryffindor's chaser. We have got food. Harry, come and have. I'm not hungry. I had enough at the feast, but nobody wanted to hear that he wasn't hungry. Nobody wanted to hear that he hadn't put his name in the goblet. Not one single person seemed to have noticed that he wasn't at all in the mood to celebrate. Lee Jordan had unearthed a Gryffindor banner from somewhere and he insisted on wrapping it around Harry like a clock. Harry couldn't get away. Whenever he tried to slide over to the staircase up to the dormitories, the crowd around him closed rank, forcing another butterbeer on him, suffering crisp and peanut into his hands. Everyone wanted to know how he had done it. Now he had tricked Dumbledore, age line, and managed to get his name into the goblet. I didn't, he said over and over again. I don't know how it happened, but for all the notice anyone took, he might just as well not have answered at all. I'm tired, he bellowed finally, after nearer half an hour. No, seriously, George, I'm going to bed. He wanted more than anything to find Ron and Hermione, to find bit of sanity, but neither of them seemed to be in the common room, insisting that he needed sleep, and almost flattening the little creepy brother as they attempted to rally him at the foot of stairs. Harry managed to shake everyone off and climb up the dormitory as fast as he could. To his great relief, he found Ron was lying on his bed in the otherwise empty dormitory, still fully dressed. He looked up when Harry slammed the door behind him. Where have you been? Harry said. Oh, hello, said Ron. He was grinning, but it was very odd, strange sort of grin. Harry suddenly became aware that he was still wearing the scarlet Gryffindor banner that Lee had tied around him. He asked him to take it off, but it was knotted very tightly. Ron lay on bed without moving, watching Harry struggle to remove it. So, he said, when Harry had finally removed the banner and throwing into a corner, congratulations. What do you mean, congratulations? Said Harry, staring at Ron. There was definitely something wrong with the way Ron was smiling. It was more like the glimpse. Well, no one else got across the age line, said Ron. Not even Fred and George. What did you use? The invisibility clock? The invisibility clock wouldn't got me over the line, said Harry slowly. All right, said Ron. I thought you might have told me if it was the clock because it would have covered both of us, wouldn't it? But you found another way, did you? Listen, said Harry. I didn't put my name in the goblet. Someone else must have done it. Ron raised his eyebrow. What would they do that for? I don't know, said Harry. He felt it would sound very melodramatic to say, to kill me. Ron's eyebrow rose so high that they were in danger and disappearing into his ear. It's okay, you can tell me the truth, he said. If you don't want everyone else to know, fine, but I don't know why you are bothering to lie. You didn't get into trouble for it, did you? That friend of the fat lady, the Violet, she already told us all Dumbledore's letting you enter. 1,000 gallons prize money, yeah? And you don't have to end off your test either. I don't put my name in that goblet, said Harry, staring to feel angry. Yeah, okay, said Ron in exactly the same spectacle tone as Cedric. Only you said this morning you had have done it last night and none one would have seen you. I'm not stupid, you know. You are doing a really good impression of it, Harry snapped. Yeah, said Ron, and there was no trace of green force or otherwise on his face. Now you want to get to bed, Harry. I expect you'll need to be up early tomorrow for a photocall or something. He wrenched the hanging shut around his four-poster, leaving Harry standing there by the door, staring at the dark red velvet curtain, now hiding one of the few people he had been surely would believed him. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see you. Bye bye.